Every few months, someone declares the online course market dead. Too many courses, too many gurus, nobody buying. And every few months, someone else posts a screenshot of a six-figure launch. Both can't be the whole story. The market is genuinely enormous and still growing, yet the average person selling a course earns almost nothing. So we ran the macro numbers to answer one question cleanly. Is the online course market actually saturated in 2026, or does that depend entirely on where you're standing? First, define saturation properly, because the word gets thrown around carelessly. A market is saturated when supply has caught up with demand, when adding another seller no longer finds a meaningful pool of unmet buyers. That is a very different question from whether the market is big or whether it is growing. A market can be expanding fast and still be brutally saturated at the level where most people compete. So we have to look at two numbers side by side. 1. How fast is buyer demand growing? The money learners actually spend. 2. How fast is seller supply growing? The number of courses chasing that money. Saturation isn't about the size of either number on its own. It is about the gap between the two. If supply is sprinting and demand is merely walking, the market is saturating even while every headline calls it a boom. Start with demand, because the demand side genuinely is strong. The global online education market was worth roughly $204 billion in 2025, and forecasts put it near $220 billion in 2026. Growth estimates cluster somewhere between 8 and 14% a year, depending on whose definition you use. By any reading, more people are learning online, spending more money, in more countries than ever before. That is not a dying market. So the people who say the course business is over are simply wrong about the top line. The demand pool is large and still filling. But notice what that number does and does not tell you. It tells you how much money buyers are spending in total. It tells you nothing about how many sellers are now reaching into that pool, and that is the half of the equation the boom headlines quietly skip. Now, the half nobody markets, the supply side. Take Udemy as the cleanest gauge, because its catalog is public. At the end of 2019, the platform listed about 130,000 courses. By 2024, it was roughly 250,000. Today, it is over 272,000 courses, taught by around 85,000 instructors. That is more than a doubling of supply in roughly 6 years, far faster than the underlying demand grew over the same window. And that is one marketplace. Layer on Coursera, Skillshare, Teachable, Kajabi, School, and the endless wave of independently sold courses, and the picture is unmistakable. The number of courses for sale has been growing dramatically faster than the number of dollars chasing them. That is the textbook definition of a market saturating. Not dying, saturating. The pie is getting bigger, but the number of forks reaching into it is getting bigger much faster. Here is where saturation stops being a theory and starts showing up in people's bank accounts. On Udemy, the median course never reaches 243 students. Read that carefully. Half of all courses on the platform attract fewer than that, ever, across their entire lifetime. And the average instructor earns roughly $3,300 a year. Not per course, per instructor, total. The revenue is ferociously concentrated. A small minority of courses capture the overwhelming majority of enrollments and income, while the long tail of tens of thousands of courses earns next to nothing. This is the exact signature of a saturated marketplace. The headline market grows every year, but the median participant's outcome gets worse, because each new entrant divides the same attention into thinner slices. The market is not short of buyers. It is short of buyers per seller. That distinction is the whole audit. But saturation is not uniform, and this is where the lazy take falls apart. The crush is worst in two specific places: generic, broad topics, and open marketplaces that compete on price. A course called General Digital Marketing or Learn to Code, listed on a marketplace that routinely discounts it to under $15, is fighting tens of thousands of near-identical listings in a race to the bottom. That corner is saturated past the point of sense. But step sideways and the room reappears. Specific transformations consistently outperform broad ones, not general fitness, but postnatal strength training or kettlebell programs for absolute beginners, not learn marketing, but cold email systems for one narrow industry. The buyer for a sharply defined outcome has far fewer alternatives. And the delivery model matters as much as the topic. Research on creator platforms finds that courses bundling coaching, community, or certification command premium prices. and that creators offering a community feature earn on the order of twice as much as those selling a video file alone. The saturated product is a cheap, generic, self-serve video library. The unsaturated product is a specific outcome delivered with access. So put the two halves together and the pattern is precise. The online course market in 2026 is simultaneously a growing market and a saturated one, and which face you see depends entirely on what you are selling and where. As an undifferentiated commodity on a discount marketplace, it is brutally saturated, and the median outcome is a few $100s a year. As a specific, credible solution to a narrow problem, sold off the marketplace with coaching or community attached, the same macro environment still has real, unclaimed room. The headline number is true, and the gloomy number is true, and they are not in conflict. They are describing two different positions in the same market. The mistake almost everyone makes is reading the top-line growth figure as permission to sell anything, when the supply data says the opposite, that the only defensible position left is specificity. Broad and cheap is where the saturation lies. Narrow and supported is where the oxygen is. So, is the online course market saturated in 2026? The honest answer is, the market isn't saturated, but most of the positions in it are. Demand is still growing at high single to low double digits, while supply on the open marketplaces has more than doubled in 6 years and shows no sign of slowing, which means the average undifferentiated course is competing harder every year for a slice that keeps getting thinner. The median seller's outcome proves it. A few hundred students at most, a few $1,000s at best. But saturation is a statement about a position, not about the whole market. The single sharpest filter is this one question: could a buyer find 10 near identical versions of what you're selling in about 30 seconds? If yes, you are in the saturated zone, and price will grind you down. If no, if your offer is specific enough and supported enough that the search comes up nearly empty, then for you the market still has room, regardless of the headline. The pie is real. The fight is over which slice you've staked out. That's the macro read.